Now I will talk about the exercise that you will be completing for this assignment. Now, whereas the previous exercise was a product-supported emotion study, this is a product-associated emotion study. And again, you can read more about that in the Paths to Emotion article. This data is from a study conducted with 30 consumers to investigate their emotional responses toward the brand after viewing print advertisements for 3 luxury brands, Prada, Gucci, and Fendi. Each participant viewed and rated their emotions toward the brand after viewing a set of 5 ads for one of the 3 brands. The ads contained images of people, places, a handbag, and the brand name. Participants rated 9 pairs of bipolar emotions on a scale ranging from -3 to +3. So it's the same set of bipolar emotions from the previous study, from example 1, exercise 1. And the interpretation of the scores is the same. A positive score means that the brand was more strongly rated on the second descriptor. A negative score indicates a stronger rating on the first descriptor. And of course, we're not interested in these just in and of themselves, but rather in how they differ from each other, from the other brands. The instructions, once again, are here in the gray cells. And so the first thing you're going to do is compute the average ratings for each emotion separately per brand. All right, so for Fendi, you're going to take all of the scores that people rated for Reliant versus Independent, compute the average here, the same for Gucci and Prada, then move on to the next emotion separately for each brand. And you can go about this in the same way as exercise 1, where we use the if command and then specify which brand and then tell it where to find the data. Now, one thing that is different about this data set is, of course, that it is not sorted, and this is typical of when you conduct research. You're going to get a data set where you have things mixed. And so in the case of using Excel for a t-test, you will need to sort this. So you will need to select the data here and click sort in order to conduct the analysis, so sort A to Z. So that's going to be, I would recommend doing that as a first step. And then that makes it a little bit easier also to compute the averages, because then you'll have everything together. It'll be in alphabetical order, so you'll have Fendi first, then Gucci, then Prada. So you'll just, let's say all of these are Fendi, you would just select all of these and say compute the average, and then so forth. So it's up to you how you want to do the averages. And then for the difference in averages, just like over here, it's the this score minus this score for Fendi versus Gucci. For Fendi versus Prada, it would be this score versus this score, so just subtracting, in other words. So this score minus this one minus this one right here. And for Gucci versus Prada, it would be this score minus this score. Okay, and again, this was done over here in the example. All right, so you can see what the formulas look like there. And then the most important part is the p-values from the t-test, which will be what allows you to determine if the differences are real. Okay, and then this will be populated over here. The EMAP, the emotion map, will be populated once you compute the averages right here. Then you'll be able to see and visualize the differences between the brands. And then down here is where we insert our decision of yes or no based on the p-value. If it's less than 0.05, then we can say yes, the difference between the emotion ratings between these two brands is a real difference, and then we can make an interpretation based on that. So this is the statistical analysis part of it. And then once we do that, then you will be answering some questions about the implications of these differences. So answering, what does this difference mean? So for example, going back to this exercise over here, the difference between Haagen-Dazs and Breyer here, it is statistically significant. This is P of p-value of 0.01, which is less than 0.05. So there is a real difference between them. And so what is that difference? You don't just tell me, yes, it's a significant difference. You have to interpret that difference. So what is the difference here? It is that the Haagen-Dazs brand was rated as more independent than Breyers. All right, so that means that when consumers taste this ice cream, they feel much more independent. Over here, let's see, there's a difference between Breyers and Ben & Jerry's. That is a real difference. And it's a negative 2.4. So if we, sort of visualize that, that scale, obviously the negative is on this end. And so that means that Breyers, right, which is the baseline brand that we're comparing against, was rated as more apathetic than Ben & Jerry's. And so it's more apathetic than passionate compared to Ben & Jerry's. And so we want to interpret these differences. Here we have a few other negative differences. And so it's important to know what the differences mean. And if you kind of need a visual to guide you, you can use the graph. So for example, if we want to figure out what this means, the sad versus joyful for Breyers and Ben & Jerry, then we can look over here. Breyers is the red line, Ben & Jerry is the green. And so we can see here, okay, so that tells us that there's this gap of 4 points is because Breyers is rated as more sad, and Ben & Jerry's is rated as more joyful. That would be the next step after computing all of these analyses and determining the significant differences. You would interpret what are these differences. So we would say, okay, the difference between Haagen and Breyers on Reliant versus Independent was significantly different. This is what it means. The same thing for this one and for all of the other yeses. And then after that, the next step is to think about the managerial implications. So I'm going to ask you for a recommendation of which of these emotions you would want to focus a marketing tactic on to position the brand or to reposition the brand. So which one could we use to appeal to consumers, and in particular, which types of consumers would it appeal to? Because not everybody wants to be overly joyful all the time. Not everyone is adventurous. Not everyone is independent. So you always have to think about the target market. So that will be part of the question. Okay, so those are the main steps in the assignment: is the conducting the statistical analysis, interpreting the results, and then writing about the managerial implications. Now for the last part of this video, I'm demonstrating here the interpretation of results and managerial implications portion of this assignment. And so you see here, Table 5, interpreting the results. We'll have the different pairs of brands. And this is where you will describe what is the difference. So here you're telling me that there is a difference, but now here you're describing what it is. So for example, for Haagen-Dazs versus Breyers, the difference here for Reliant versus Independent means that consumers rated Haagen-Dazs ice cream as making them feel significantly more independent versus Reliant than Breyers. And then we go across here because we're focusing on Haagen-Dazs versus Breyers, and we move on to the next significant difference and interpret what that means, and continuing on down the line. And then we'll go on to the next set of comparison brands and interpret the significant differences, telling the reader what they mean. And then lastly, Breyers versus Ben & Jerry's. So then once we've interpreted what the differences are, now we can focus on managerial implications and strategic recommendations. So the first question is pretty simple. What will you conclude is the emotional value that the target brand, in this case the Haagen-Dazs brand, provides to consumers? So we're focusing on Haagen-Dazs. And so given that the sort of the main differences between Haagen-Dazs and other brands and its peak emotions involve passion, and over here the feelings of independence. So it's its highest rating, and it's a significant difference between it and the other brands. When it comes to passion, it sets it apart from one of its competitors, from Breyers. And so those are sort of its peak, peak emotions that it evokes, and sets it apart from its competition. So for this section, I've written here that Haagen-Dazs primarily makes consumers feel independence and passion, which provides emotional value. And then, what emotions should Haagen-Dazs focus on in its marketing communications to add value to the product for consumers? And so, given that these two emotions complement each other, being independent and being passionate, I wrote here that I would suggest combining these in marketing communications to add value. And then here, propose and defend a marketing communications tactic to appeal to the emotions identified above and specify the target market. And so here, again, the idea is to be specific. So don't just say, oh, they should do a social media campaign to, increase independence and passion. That doesn't tell me anything. So here I've provided some detail. So I said an advertising campaign involving web and TV commercials that depict men and women in scenarios that arouse feelings of independence and passion. And then I take it a step further and describe what that means. What would I envision as ads that would arouse these feelings? And so I give the description, scene by scene, and then remember, you have to propose and defend the marketing communications tactics. So I would say these ads are designed to evoke emotions of independence and passion in the target market, and we have to specify what that is. And so I explain here that it's employed men and women who work white-collar jobs, because these ads depict somebody getting their first job and then getting a promotion in their job, aged 25 to 35, and seeking the benefit of feeling independent and or passionate from their treats and desserts. All right, so those are the 3 questions for the managerial implications section that you will be also performing for the exercise for this assignment.